Welcome to HCS Talks. I'm your host, Superintendent of Hampton City Schools, Raymond Haynes. This is a Hampton City Schools podcast. We are still fairly new to the world of podcasts as we released our first podcast about 3 months ago. HCS Talks is designed to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain our community and beyond. We will talk about a lot of different topics related to education, students, teachers, support staff, parents, programs and initiatives, community partnerships, and more. Some of it will just be informative no matter who you are. So we hope you will stay tuned and keep listening to HCS Talks. Today, I have the opportunity to sit down with one of our Kecoughtan High School alumnus, Mr. Ricky Matthews, who is now a meteorologist on WAVY TV 10. So thank you for being here, Mr. Matthews. I'm looking forward to our conversation and learning more about you, your experiences as a Hampton City School student, and now your career as a meteorologist. So let's begin by learning about your education and career path.
Well, thanks for having me this morning. I appreciate the opportunity. I grew up in Hampton. Grew up very close to Nickerson Boulevard and Fox Hill Road area. So I went to Phillips Elementary School, and then Sims Middle School, and then eventually, as you mentioned, Kecoughtan High School, which were all fairly really close and,
Yes, sir.
And great schools to go to when I did. Graduated from Kecoughtan in 2011. From there, I was looking around at colleges, and in 2011, there weren't many colleges in Virginia that offered meteorology. And a little backtrack, I actually wanted to do aviation somewhat too, but aviation's a very expensive field to get into if you don't just straight up join the military, which is a great route to go. But so anyway, I wanted to do meteorology, decided on that. And at the time, no college in Virginia had a program. Virginia Tech has now created a program, but at the time there was no other school that offered it. So closest state was North Carolina. So I looked to North Carolina. NC State was had a program. UNC Charlotte had a program, and I believe UNC Asheville had a program at the time. Looked around and just decided that Charlotte was the right fit for me, and went to school in Charlotte for a couple of years, had a couple internships there and back here in Hampton Roads, and then moved on to my first job after that.
So Charlotte is a nice city too. Yeah. So it didn't entice you to want to remain in that particular area?
Well, so the interesting thing about our career field, at least with the broadcast sector of meteorology, is that basically each TV market is given a number. 1 through, I want to say it's 214. Number 1 is New York City. Right. 214 is, I believe, somewhere out in Montana or North Dakota. And it's based off market size, how many people live there. So typically, if you're starting out, just like a lot of jobs, they want experience. And you're probably not going to get hired in Charlotte out of your first job.
Right.
So I ended up working in Bristol, Tennessee, which is right there on the state line, basically, of Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Half the city's actually in Virginia, half the city's in Tennessee. So I worked there for a while, about 6 to 7 years. Got, enough experience, and then an opportunity came up here in Hampton Roads at WAVY, and it was my home market. And I knew that I didn't really want to just jump around to a different city just to jump around to a different city.
Right.
And I wanted to live somewhere where I liked and, had an interest. And I met my wife back in Tennessee, so, I had to factor that into the decision making too. And so ended up getting the job here in Hampton Roads at WAVY, which is based out of Portsmouth and Norfolk, and it's been a great fit.
All right. So your wife, does she like this particular area?
Yeah. Well, she likes it on the days when it's nice and sunny and she can go to the beach. In the winter, when the sun sets at 4:30, 5 o'clock, she's a little seasonal depression maybe kicks in a little bit. But
yes, sir.
The key is to stay active and keep finding fun things. That's been cool for me, being able to show her different things that I went to. I mean, show her my old schools, show her where we used to go get our Christmas tree, show her all these different things that we used to do back when I lived here growing up. And so that's been a neat opportunity.
Excellent. Does she still have family in Tennessee?
Yeah, all of her family's actually in Tennessee.
How often do you all get back there?
She gets back more than me. But, every couple of months, I would say. And it's close enough. Bristol's about 6.5, 7 hours from here. And so it's close enough to where you can drive, and it's a road trip for sure.
Right.
But you can make it there.
All right. So tell me, when did you spark an interest in the weather?
So my first recollection of anything weather related was back in second grade. We had a nor'easter come through. And for someone who's not familiar with what a nor'easter is, it's basically an area low pressure that forms off our coastline. Typically, it gives us some wind and some rain and sometimes some tidal flooding. But if you have enough cool air, sometimes you can wrap in some snow to these nor'easters. And that's what happened with this one. It transitioned from rain to snow. And my mom vividly remembers my second grade teacher letting me call home, I believe it was Miss Kleinhintz, and letting to tell her that, hey, it was snowing. And it wasn't snowing anything crazy. It was just like some flurries. But to me, that was really exciting.
Right.
Because I kind of knew that that was going to happen. And so that was my first kind of idea of, oh, the weather is changing and you can kind of predict it into the future. And so from there, my second biggest memory, which may be familiar with some listeners, was Hurricane Isabel, which was in fifth grade for me, 2003, September 18th. We just passed the 20-year anniversary, which is hard to believe, of Isabel. And I remember looking on my teacher's computer at the Hurricane Center website and looking at the storm track and then getting out of school that afternoon and knowing there was no way we were going to have school for a while after that storm. And we just found some home videotapes of me during the storm and kind of talking about what was going on and trying to explain what was going on. And of course, our
so
street
you were
flooded.
doing some broadcasting back then as a fifth grader?
Kind of back in fifth grade. I'm thankful I get paid for it now. But back in fifth grade, I was, doing my best Jim Cantori impression, or for WAVY viewers, our best Andy Fox impression, standing out there in the weather. So
nice. So you mentioned aviation as well. That was continues to be an interest of yours too. So are you doing anything with that?
So my grandfather was Air Force. He spent 30 years in the Air Force, and then he transitioned to U.S. Airways, which at the time was, I believe, Piedmont Airlines back in the day. And so he flew and then kind of gave me the aviation bug, per se. So back in 2011, when I was still a senior in high school, I actually got my pilot's license. And so...
Wait, you got your pilot's license?
Yeah.
While you were still in high school.
That was my senior year, so had to do it before I went to college because I was taking the classes per se and the flying out at actually Langley Air Force Base back when they had an aero club there, and so I was doing all that my senior year, which was interesting. Putting that on top. I remember I was in physics class and. Coach Chrisman at Kecoughtan High School, he was a former Air Force pilot as well. And so one day I was there in physics class, finished all my stuff, and I was just studying some aviation things. And we had these flight computers. They're called EA6B flight computers. Basically, they don't look like calculators, but they're kind of instruments that allow us to calculate different things in the air. And so he saw it, and he was like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen one of these in years, and was really excited to try it out and get back into it. But yeah, I was doing all that when I was still a senior. And from there, I've just kind of flown, kind of occasionally since then. So, but got to take my wife up on her first flight ever. She had never flown an airplane until she flew with me. So that was kind of exciting.
Her first time was with you.
Yeah, her first time flying an airplane was with me. Thankfully, being a meteorologist, I picked a nice, calm morning with no turbulence, no chance of thunderstorms, anything like that. And it was a nice, smooth flight.
So how far have you flown? What's the furthest you've flown?
My friends and I one time flew from North Carolina, picked me up in Bristol, and then we flew down to Columbus, Mississippi, to meet my other friend who lived down there at the time. So that was about a 7-hour flight or so, a couple hops in between. But, it's a very interesting way to, explore. And the interesting thing is obviously aviation and weather kind of go together. So I've always been able to pair my two interests pretty well.
Nice. That is very neat. So have you thought about pursuing that even further, the aviation track? Or
every once in a while, there's pluses and minuses to that track. Like a lot of jobs, obviously you're away from home a lot in that kind of field. And aviation is an inherently very expensive field to get into. That's why a lot of people do go the military route. But having said that, there's an airline shortage right now, or a pilot shortage right now. Many of the older pilots are retiring out, and so the airlines are looking for more pilots. So if anyone's interested in that route, it's kind of a good time to get into that.
So actually, Ricky, having that license, does that automatically qualify you for like Delta and United and Southwest?
It doesn't automatically qualify you. So I have a private pilot's license.
Okay.
And so basically there's different tiers. Private pilot's license is basically like, think of it like step one, I guess, for aviation. And then from there, you would typically transition to your instrument license and then your commercial license.
Right.
And to be able to fly someone for hire on a basic level, you have to have a commercial license. The airlines also have different rules in place, like you have to have logged so many hours as a safety standard. And of course, they have their own training processes you got to go through too.
Right.
But it helps. There's different avenues in aviation too. For example, the NOAA hurricane hunters. They are the people who fly out into hurricanes and to gather information about them. And so they've told me before, hey, we'd love to have you because you're a pilot and a meteorologist. You'd fit right in.
So has WAVY utilized you in that way?
In some cases, yes. So we have a Chopper 10 at WAVY, and so I'm blessed every once in a while to be able to go up in Chopper 10, just either doing a story or kind of sort of co-piloting, I guess you would say, with Scott Abbott, who's our pilot. So a lot of times I'll go up, and because I have an aviation background and aviation knowledge, I'm able to assist him with navigation or looking out for traffic or aviation maps in a way that someone who, maybe doesn't have a background in aviation wouldn't be able to. So I've been able to do that. I've been heavily involved in our coverage of the air shows, and anytime there's like an airplane story, I'm like, oh, let me do that, because I know some things about this that some people may not. So I try to be involved in aviation as much as I can.
Just listening to you, I can see how meteorology and aviation go hand in hand, and like you're the perfect person for the job as well.
Thank you.
So I know you shared earlier in the introduction that you are a Hamptonian, as am I. You attended Phillips. Mm-hmm. Sims and Kecoughtan. So share with the listening audience how Hampton City Schools has helped shape you into the person you are today.
So as I mentioned earlier, second grade was probably my first recollection of weather. And I think all throughout elementary school, it was the teachers allowing me to explore my interests that really helped. And then that transitioned to middle school. Dr. Caggiano, I forget his role now.
He's the deputy superintendent and chief of staff now.
So at the time, he was our principal at Sims Middle School.
Yes.
And so Sims would do morning announcements, and initially we were doing them over just the intercom system. And he was like, hey, does anyone want to do weather? Come find me and reach out to me and we can do that. And so I was the person who said, I'll do that. And so then we transitioned to video announcements. And so I used to do the morning announcements, the weathercast on that, which transitioned into me being known as the weather person for the entire school, right? For multiple grade levels as well. The students ahead of me and the students behind me, they knew me as that.
So from there, a star was born.
I guess you could say that, yeah. So from there, going through Sims, once again, having teachers who listen to me and encourage us to explore our interest, and going through each of those different grade levels. Sometimes weather was mixed in. Got to, I believe it was ninth grade. I remember Miss Coolbear. She was our science teacher at the time. And she always jokes now when I speak to her that she's like, he probably knew more weather than I did back in the day. But, we were able to do hurricane tracking charts sometimes, and having that interest co-align with some of our curriculum really allowed me to explore what I wanted to do.
It's pleasing to hear you sharing the stories and me knowing the folks. Mm-hmm. Dr. Caggiano and I work very closely together and have been connected at the hip for over 29 years now. You mentioned Coach Chrisman. Uh-huh. He has since retired, but he was there when I was principal at Kecoughtan, and Miss Coolbear is still there and still doing some great things. Are you able to share a memory from school or a teacher who may have impacted you in some way? I know you shared some examples, but any specific memory you may have in a way that an educator has made an impact on your life?
Well, I mentioned a lot of science classes and stuff like that, but obviously education expands beyond just the science classes. I remember taking Spanish with Hector Morales, and took many years, and he made learning Spanish fun, which very much benefited me back once I got into college, because I took 4 years at Kecoughtan, and I was able to place out of having to take it in college. So it saved me some money and saved a little bit of time there. Some of my government classes were really fun. We even had journalism and yearbook back at Kecoughtan, and I was involved in that. And so all of those classes and teachers that I had over the years certainly bring back good memories.
It's certainly pleasing to hear, even in my role as superintendent, the impact Hampton has made on you in terms of preparing you for life in general. So that's one of the things we continue to focus on as we move to the academies model, I'm sure you're familiar with. And we often talk about the portrait of a Hampton graduate and ensuring young people are college, career, and life ready. But you just shared with us how Hampton City Schools has made learning relevant, learning relevant for you to the point where you were able to further pursue your career interest as well as your interest in aviation as well. So certainly pleasing to hear that, and we're certainly proud of you being a Hampton City Schools graduate as well.
Well, thank you.
Any hobbies or interests you'd like to share with the listening audience? I know aviation is an interest, but any other hobbies?
As we mentioned, aviation. Obviously, our area is very heavily water involved. So my wife and I love to go out to Fort Monroe. I go paddleboarding out there a lot, kayaking, stuff like that, being able to kind of explore that. I'm involved in drone photography, biking, stuff like that. So
nice.
Our area allows us to stay pretty active.
And you like being outdoors, it sounds like.
Yeah, I like being outdoors on good weather days and bad weather days. I may be the worst person to give advice when it comes to, hey, stay inside when there's a storm. Well, guess where I am? Probably not inside. But the difference is I know what the tornado is probably going to do versus like everyone else.
The predictability of it all helps you. Yeah. Any advice you would give to Hampton City School students who are aspiring to become a meteorologist?
So meteorology is very heavily math and science oriented. Depending on the field, though, that you go into, it's also communication oriented. So I'll backtrack a second to the math and science. Calculus is huge in meteorology, and I struggle with that. When I didn't take many advanced math classes when I was going through Hampton City Schools, but when I got to college, I had to take Calc 1, Calc 2, differential equations, stats, all this. And so when I got to college, having some calculus background, but not having a ton of calculus background, I started just a little behind where I probably should have started for going through that program. However, I was able to catch up pretty quickly, and it wasn't a big deal. So I say this to tell someone who may not be great at math or may struggle with math a little bit, that just because you may struggle with it doesn't mean that you can't succeed in it one day. And same thing for really any field. Right. If you struggle with it, it's all just about, buckling down and trying to study more and eventually get there.
I know the math teachers who may be listening to this, they are probably jumping for joy that you said that as well. And make certain we let Miss Vinnie know that, who is our curriculum leader for mathematics. So you talked about the calculus classes. Any other classes they should focus on while in high school?
So one I would say that probably people don't think about is communication. Many scientists are not the most outgoing people sometimes, but especially in my field of the broadcast sector and in a lot of research sectors, being able to communicate efficiently is key. I can tell you it's going to be 75 and a 20% chance of rain tomorrow. But if I can't communicate that to you in a way that it makes sense as to when that 20% is going to happen or when that 75 is going to be, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The forecast is only as good as what people understand of it. And we obviously have a lot more of that we have to factor in when it gets into complex weather like hurricanes and severe weather. But any class that allows you to expand your communication aspects, and even the Spanish classes and the foreign language classes, bilingual, communication is a big thing now and will continue to be a big thing for many years. So those type of classes are important.
We have to get you back more often because you're giving some great advice and some great insight just all around. So it looks like when you're talking about, for the most part, being in any particular field of work, we realize the importance of the communication factor, both oral and written, and we see how it has benefited you in your role as a meteorologist as well. What is the most challenging part of your job and also the most rewarding?
The most challenging part has to be snow events for a multitude of reasons. And I would say really any big weather event, and sometimes even weather days when it's a 60% chance of rain or a 70% chance of rain, but it's not going to come through till 5 o'clock, and everyone thinks that, the entire day is going to be ruined because there's a high chance for rain. No, it's probably going to be in a 30-minute time window when this front comes through. But being able to communicate efficiently in a way where everyone gets what you're saying. We have a saying sometimes that a 50% chance of rain means a 100% chance of confusion, because probability, precipitation is a hard thing for people to sometimes understand, because it does mean different things. And so being able to communicate that can sometimes be a struggle. The most rewarding thing is, the most rewarding thing in two aspects for me is always when we have severe weather and people trust me as a voice, because our job is to be a calm but informative voice during severe weather, like tornadoes or hurricanes, because people's lives are at risk.
Right.
And you want to make sure they have the information and they know what to do. From there, personally, a neat, rewarding story has been getting emails from some former teachers or some former classmates and being like, oh, look, we knew him when he was this and
Yes.
that. And, being able to do that. And nowadays, we do a lot of school visits. So we get to go back into Hampton City Schools and speak to fifth graders or kindergartners or second graders about weather. And it's always kind of cool when the teachers are like, oh, he went to Hampton City Schools. Sometimes they're like, he didn't go to our school. He went to a different elementary school. But it's neat to be able to share with our community my path and my knowledge.
Right. So I imagine when you go to Phillips, though, that's like a homecoming event for you.
Phillips, I realize, these hallways are a lot smaller than I remember they were. And these kids, sometimes I think the kids are bigger than I remember being back then. But yes, Phillips is really cool to go back to. And I've done a multitude of different events too. Phillips, I did a fifth grade promotion ceremony.
Okay.
At Kecoughtan, I did a career talk. So, a lot of times we do these school talks where we talk about weather and we talk about different types of weather they learn. But it's been neat to be able to do some of these different experiences or different types of events at these schools.
Absolutely. I can certainly relate to that most challenging part of your job. Well, I've not experienced it yet, but in my previous roles as the chief of schools and being at the table with the superintendent making decisions about snow events, I can only imagine how that will be for me now. It may be one of the most challenging and rewarding aspects for me as well, and ensuring that we keep our community, our young people and staff members safe in the event the inclement weather does come about. So I may be connecting with you as well, getting some insight. So. Yes, sir. So I'd like to end on the most important question of this podcast. Do students or even adults ever ask you to inflate the snow forecast so that they could have a snow day?
I wouldn't say too often, but every once in a while you get the tweet or the Facebook message or something saying, can't you just forecast like a foot of snow? I like to think our leaders are a little bit smarter than that to go with the false weather report. Just like any good science experiment, you usually want to look at a couple different sources and a couple different avenues. And if one of them's an outlier, you're probably not going to go with that one. But it's certainly something that sometimes is a question. But I like to be right sometimes when it comes to the forecast.
Yes, sir.
But the interesting thing about snow is, let's say I forecast 3 to 6 inches of snow. No one hears the 3 inches. They hear the 6 inches.
Yes.
And they say, that's what we're going to get. Whether the range is more likely to go towards 3 and it's just a slight chance of 6, they're going to hit on that 6.
Spoken like a true scientist. And you're right, Ricky. If I have any questions or doubts, I have your direct number now. I certainly appreciate you joining me today and sharing more about you and your experiences as a student and your career. I'm sure our listening audience has thoroughly enjoyed our time together as well. And to our listeners, remember, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. As one community, one transformation, we will ensure academic excellence for every child, every day, whatever it takes. We will catch you next time.
Listen to learn more about Hampton City Schools. New episodes of HCS Talks drop on Thursdays. Subscribe and listen to HCS Talks. HCS Talks is a Hampton City Schools production.